It is Monday, friends. That means it's time for a Q&A. For those of you just joining us, the rules are very simple. All you have to do is leave your questions down below, and hopefully they will be answered on next week's show. And before we start this week, any questions about the armor coding system? Unfortunately, I cannot answer this week because the Q&A was last week before it happened. Over the weekend, some news dropped about Halo Infinite, some changes to standard color customization options in Halo. Halo Infinite will be dropping that in favor of a skin system that can be applied to armors and weapons and stuff, and the announcement did not go down well with the community, and I made a video on the topic, so if you are curious, you can check out my recent upload about that. But let's kick this week off with a question from Wesley Miles, who says, Q&A. Where do you think fans of Halo 5's style of gameplay fit into the overall fanbase? Do you feel their opinions are valid and deserve to be considered? Love your videos. Hope you see this. So, off the bat, yes, all opinions are valid. It's a very unhealthy mindset to kind of shun and almost treat certain people who have certain preferences as if they don't matter. And talking down to people is also kind of a problem that I have been actively trying to solve this year. I'm not particularly fond of Halo 5. It does not resonate with me, and it doesn't really... As a game, its goals are not really what I like to play Halo for, but there are people who do kind of enjoy that core gameplay-focused design, where it's not really about the external sandbox and the external map design, it's more about the way that you can be a human pinball, pinging yourself and knocking yourself around the environment and causing as much chaos with the core gameplay abilities that you carry on your person at all time. For me, I am more interested in kind of a very restrictive gameplay style, which means I have to overcome my limitations with very interesting level design, sandbox items, vehicles, gadgets, and all these things. I think that's fun. I think something that would actually help when it comes to discourse about this is usually when we talk about our favorite Halos, there's a almost built-in defense mechanism that's reflexive. I don't think anybody is actually at fault for doing it. We're all doing it for some reason, where we feel almost guilty for admitting that we like it because it's what we personally prefer in things, that we have personal biases towards certain mechanics and styles of game. When people defend Halo 5, they feel the need to say that it's objectively better than what came before. It improves the formula. They're not comfortable with saying that they prefer it because that's the style of game that they've grown to like, or that they've evolved to start liking as they age. And then to use me as an example, so I really like Halo 3, and usually in the past whenever people would criticize Halo 3, I'd be quick to defend the game. But as I've grown older, I've started to be okay with admitting, yeah, you know what, I have an emotional connection to that game. That game means a lot to me. And it's due to a lot of circumstances in my life, kind of like the environment that I grew up in, and it kind of being my first next-gen being the Xbox 360 gaming experience. It was quite impactful as far as games go. I have a lot of fond memories of the split screen and stuff, the music, the individual voice quotes and lines, just that game resonates with me a lot. And I'm okay with that. We can spend hours and hours on Waypoint or the Halo subreddit or YouTube comment sections or Twitter trying to explain to someone why you emotionally feel resonant with the game and getting frustrated that they don't feel that same emotional resonance. Or we can just explain from our perspective why we really like a game and understand that other people won't because they're not you. They don't have the very specific memories that you have with that certain product. So, yeah, all opinions do matter, and I do think it's worth hearing other people out, and I hope that kind of as we go on, people start not feeling a desire to be very defensive about their opinions. Be comfortable, be confident with your personal opinions and experiences with the topic. Bring what you personally feel to the discussion, and listen to those people. So the next question comes from Angus North, who says, Q&A, what do you think about the decline in quality of the games industry? And how do you think it can improve while still making money? So, as far as the topic of the decline of the games industry, I actually think that that's not the case. I think the games industry is actually doing much better than it ever has before, and let me explain why. I can clarify that. I can already hear people talking about things like Anthem, Marvel's Avengers, Ubisoft's Hyperscape, and other kind of like notorious failures. So, the reason I don't think it's failing is because you need to kind of evaluate what you view as success in the games industry, because when people point out things like Anthem or Marvel's Avengers, like these not really that good games that came out, I can always refer back to, well, about 3 years ago, we had Prey 2017, the very first Bioshock-style immersive sim in years, and it was incredible. Or when we think of Resident Evil 3, which was this really mediocre action shooter, I can say, well, the previous year we got Resident Evil 2, one of the best horror survival games in years. As far as RPGs go, I actually just recently found out that Fallout New Vegas is on Xbox Game Pass, so I've been playing it on my console. Kind of away from my PC, which is kind of weird. That game is incredible, and I can play it right now. The video game industry in the moment, there are a couple of big, loud failures, but when you look at the broad spectrum of things to play, things that we can do, we've got games like Monster Hunter World, which are just incredible. I've actually recently started playing that as well, and it's incredibly cool. I can't believe I never played it before. Deus Ex Mankind Divided was on sale on Steam for about $3, DLC included, so I picked that up and I'm looking forward to replaying it. There's a lot of really great things right now in the games industry. And if we focus so much on the embarrassing high-profile failures or the kind of cheap, weird, slimy, like battle pass systems, like where you just kind of feel like a game is just waiting to shake you down, sometimes it's worth actually stepping away from that bubble and looking towards games in the past or even indie games. The games industry is large. It's not just Activision, Ubisoft, EA, and Square Enix. There are other developers out there. There's indie developers that are putting out incredible things that I think it's worth taking a look at. The games industry is a really cool thing. Unfortunately, when it fails, it's very loud and irritating in the way that it fails, and so it can create a picture of something that is failing. No, I don't think the games industry is declining. It's just, we've got a lot of really loud games that are doing very dumb things. So the next question comes from Stormish Breeze, who says, Q&A, what sort of mechanic or balancing do you think 343 could bring to Infinite that would benefit the game the most? To bring Halo back to its former glory, would you want dual wielding, a specific balance of weapons, remove/add certain weapons or types of weapons, etc.? So it's not necessarily a removal or an addition of one thing, it's more of a philosophy, in my opinion. So what makes Halo levels really memorable are the levels themselves. And I think something that Halo has struggled with a little bit is wanting to come up with cool gameplay moments as the hook of the level. In Halo 5, I think everybody constantly refers back to that point where you sprint down the side of a Guardian, and they're like, that was so memorable, it was so cool. In my opinion, I thought it was one of the more boring situations in the game because it wasn't actually gameplay driven, it was just kind of spectacle driven, which that's okay in moderation. The problem is Halo 5, that was really all it had to be memorable. Where it's just like, oh my god, run, 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 run. Or I think of the ending of Halo 4. I really do not like that ending, or the ending of Halo 5, where its finality, its conclusion, is the controller being taken away from the player, and you watch as your main character, independently of you, finishes the final level for you, like crawling over to a thing, press X to do the thing and punch the laser or whatever. You don't have control over it, where I think of Halo 3's ending, where you're allowed to shoot Guilty Spark in the face. It doesn't happen in a cutscene. It's not a big boss battle with silly mechanics. Narratively, the game respects your agency enough to say, this isn't a cutscene, here's a Spartan laser, you shoot him yourself. And then you take to a Warthog and you race to the finale yourself. It's things like that that I really like. I think Halo needs to put a lot of value on the levels and giving the player agency to explore the levels, and the levels need to almost be inviting in their own right. You know, it can't just be geometry with Covenant placed here and there. The geometry matters, the Covenant do matter, but the personalities of the levels also need to matter on their own. Are there going to be AI running around? Are we going to have to protect civilians? Is there going to be a massive scarab stomping around? As for the Covenant, will the Covenant have access to vehicles? Will they have access to equipment? Will they be able to deploy shields to protect themselves and stuff? Like, things outside of the player need to be given identities. It can't be all about the player, you know? As funny as that sounds, the player is not the most important part. The level is the most important part of the game. And the player needs to be invited into the level and all the mysteries and magic that it has in store. That's something that I want Halo to focus on going forward. Halo 5 definitely tried. It made a very good attempt to focus on some of those things, but it just couldn't help itself but refer all the way back to the player at all times. And definitely the squad system, I think, severely limited what they would have been capable of doing. You couldn't really make a lot of diverse experiences when it all has to be balanced around 4 players at all times. So, yeah, that's kind of how I feel. I can elaborate if that was a little bit vague. The next question comes from Brian Draws Terribly, who says, Q&A, on the topic of DLC, do you think Infinite can implement story DLC that weaves into the main story, having Osiris and or Blue Team on missions that can take place before, during, or after Infinite's story, taking place kind of like Halo 3 ODST took place during behind the scenes of Halo 2? Okay. I understand the question. So definitely anything could happen. Halo Infinite, unfortunately, 343 has uttered the threat of a 10-year journey that seems to almost be like a curse in the games industry. Most games that come out promising a 10-year journey, the launches are very rough and kind of traumatic for the player bases involved. And it's a phrase I hope the game industry stops using, because it kind of puts players in the mindset of, oh boy, this is going to crash and burn, and players actually start rooting against the game. That's just kind of like a little thing that I think funny. Obviously, I hope Halo Infinite doesn't crash and burn, but the 10-year journey was like, my heart skipped a beat. I was like, oh, you uttered the phrase. You know, it's almost like saying good luck to somebody, where it's like, no, don't say that, you're going to jinx it. So if future Halo stories do happen in Halo Infinite, I think that that has a lot of potential to be really cool. So I am actually controversially a big fan of game DLCs, of paid expansions to games. Because usually I think it's a lot of fun when the game is already developed, the engine is already there, the assets are already there, the game comes out, and then you have kind of a lower budget DLC that is made with all the tools already available to the developers. They don't need to develop it alongside producing the actual game. Some of my favorite game experiences come from post-launch DLC. Dying Light's The Following, I think, is excellent as an expansion. We've got Prey's Moon Crash DLC, which I think is way better than it has any right to be. It's almost its own game. If they wanted to sell it independently of the Prey experience, it could be its own game. It's very, very good. The Dishonored games consistently have very good DLC. I think back to Bioshock 2's Minerva's Den story DLC, which I consider to be better than Bioshock 2 the video game. Story DLCs are really good and fun. And Halo Infinite, I would absolutely love to see story DLCs, and even characters like Fireteam Osiris, where I don't particularly like any of them. Not because I think they're bad characters, but because I think they're very boring. I think that you could potentially reintroduce them in an optional story DLC, and I'd like to see 343 take another crack at them. Who knows? They took this pilot, we don't even know this pilot's name yet, and I already like him a lot the few times that we've seen him. Maybe Fireteam Osiris could benefit from some of Halo Infinite's character writing. The next question comes from Toasty Pringles, who says, Q&A, hey Late Night Gaming, would you enjoy having an actual sneak mechanic in Halo Infinite with like a detection system, like Tom Clancy's The Division 2 or something else, like how Fallout did sneak? So on the topic of sneak, I would actually really like to see the series embrace the sneak mechanic. Halo is in a very unique situation where most engagements in Halo are initiated by the player. It's usually you stumbling upon the Covenant and opening fire first. You know, you're very rarely ambushed by them. And I think that Halo, that's why sneaking does work in Halo. Think of like Combat Evolved, all the kind of like iconic moments of sneaking through the sleeping grunts. Halo 5 tried a couple of sneaking moments in its campaign where you're sneaking through crowds of sleeping grunts. Obviously, the immersion is instantly ruined by the fact that there aren't actually patrols moving around, because you have AI players who at any moment could just walk into line of sight. But if there is no squad system, you could actually explore the sneak mechanic and more in depth, and it would feel organic within Halo's combat rhythm, because usually you're firing the first shot. So I'd like to see Halo actually explore a stealth mechanic a bit more intensively. I'd not like it to be handled like Ubisoft usually does it. Usually Ubisoft's is very, very inorganic. There's a detection meter. It's very gamey. Where Halo is a series that's very much focused on you reading your enemy's body language. Like the Covenant are all very expressive animation-wise. You know what they're thinking just by looking at them. So I'd probably not use Ubisoft as an example, but yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on that. So the next question is actually kind of humbling. This was a very nice question to be asked. So 2007, the year 2007 asks, Q&A, the reason I have watched your channel for years now is simply you have no shortage of explanation. Not to get weirdly personal in the YouTube comment, but this sort of descriptive capability, turning a subjective feeling into objective notion, is something I have struggled with for a very long time. I particularly enjoy how you can turn memories from your childhood into something that feels like we've all experienced, and how you have these very particular things that interest you that would commonly fall on deaf ears, and describe it so well that we sit here for 20 minutes for you to just talk. I don't know how else to ask the question other than how. That was a very kind question to ask, and I really appreciate that. People have said that I'm a very good storyteller, and I'm not quite sure what it is that I do, but people do seem to actually just enjoy hearing things that I say. Something that I do. Okay, I am back. Sorry, I'm a child. That just caught me by surprise. Usually the way that I enjoy things is I'll get weirdly fixated on something for about a week, and then I'll move on to my next fixation. I'm not a very balanced person. I usually have specific interests that swallow up a lot of my creative energy and thought for like maybe a week before it's something else takes over. Like the past couple of weeks, I've been on a weird Left 4 Dead grind. I can't stop playing that game. I can't stop reading the Left 4 Dead wiki, talking about it and stuff, and I'm already starting to feel my interest gravitating towards other games. I'm actually thinking of picking up the Zombie Army trilogy on the Switch, as well as Zombie Army 4 Dead War. Like, I bounce between subjects, and because I get so fixated on these subjects, I have a lot of time to kind of process why it is that I'm liking things. I have a lot of time to kind of explore very, very small things that charm me about the game. And something that might help some people who do kind of want to be able to express why they like certain things is immerse yourself in it for about a week. If you really like Combat Evolved and you can't think of why, play through the game from start to finish with a notebook. Play it on easy if you want, that way it's kind of like a casual experience, but every little thing that happens in that game, write it down if you really liked it, if you appreciated it. If it's something that later Halo games didn't do, that even if it's an irrational opinion, kind of irritate you that they didn't do that. Write it all down and kind of allow yourself to be immersed in why you like a thing for as long as you need to. Just immerse yourself in that subject. And the final question comes from Half-Baked Memes, who says, Q&A. How would you personally rework the Prophet boss fight? It's so silly that I wouldn't change it at all, but how would you change it if you had to? I do agree, the Prophet boss fight is silly, it's bad, it's dumb, and it's beautiful. We need to protect it at all costs. But if I were to change the Prophet boss fight in Halo 2, I would not make it a boss fight. I think that's something that Halo needs to be more comfortable with. It doesn't need to be a capital B boss fight. The way I would have handled Regret, is properly handle it like an assassination. Have the Prophet of Regret speaking to an auditorium in a Forerunner structure with all of his Covenant followers there and stuff. Maybe give Master Chief a sniper rifle outside or a rocket launcher or something. Have vents under, that way he can get up behind and just punch the Prophet in the back, killing him instantly. And then the whole congregation goes crazy. You know, the elites pull out their swords and a firefight ensues. But that's the way I would handle it. Allow the Prophet to be a video game enemy in the environment that can go down very easily. Allow him to be the catalyst for something. I kind of think of Halo 3's Brute Chieftain fight on the level The Ark. It's this very understated thing, but I appreciate it a lot because the game doesn't treat it like a boss battle, where you've kind of got that Brute Chieftain who will taunt you and then run away, and you see him later, and he's standing there. All his brutes are kind of crouched down looking at you, and the brute is challenging you. He's like, "Fight me!" And he's like slamming his hammer on the ground to bait you over to him. And you can do that. The brutes won't engage with you. It's you versus this chieftain, and nothing special about him. He's just an AI. And when you kill him, all of the brute pack goes crazy, and they start shooting at you, and it's just chaos ensues. I treat it kind of like that, you know? Have Chief properly kill the Prophet of Regret, and then all of his bodyguards draw out their energy swords and just come after you, and kind of that's what's memorable about it, is how cool it was once you killed the Prophet, how shocked the grunts were, how they all started fleeing, the jackals took out their energy swords screaming insults at you, and so on and so forth. And that wraps up this week. Guys, that was a lot of fun. Leave some more questions down below, and I hope that you all have a good Monday. And I'll see you all on the next video.